Hello everyone, this is part 21 of What If Naruto Passed the Genin test, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. This is bad, Naruto mumbled. All around him were fires raging uncontrolled through the buildings. Pillars of smoke billowed high into the air. Most if not all of Konoha's western quarter was engulfed in flame. The roar of the firestorm was almost so loud as to blot out the screams and cries of the battle. Dozens of ninja were scattered about. There were only a few that wore Konoha's symbolic leaf, and most of those that did were town guard or chunin engaged in fierce hand-to-hand combat with multiple invaders that carried the sound's insignia embossed on their uniform. The Uzumaki boy had arrived on the scene alone, unable to find his team, and instantly thrown himself into the heart of the fray. He fought like a man possessed, but the enemy outnumbered him dozens to one at least. Naruto spun around to SA hooded Nin in the face, spattering bits of brain, crushed skull and a sound forehead protector across the ground, then turned and flung a kunai into the chest of another nin dressed in black with the same loyalties as the first. Neither one of the victims had seen their fate coming as Naruto had come at him from the side, but now that his advantage in surprise was gone, Naruto quickly found himself swarmed by the hordes of enemy ninja jumping into the city through the gaping hole in the wall. Look out! Ino shouted to Naruto. The boy in the black Anbu suit ducked as Ino's specialty shuriken whizzed over his head and slashed open the end of another invader. The two genin were at each other's sides instantly. Where have you been? Shouted Naruto angrily, whirling like a dervish and whipping his swords from their sheaths. Trying to stop this, Ino retorted as she unleashed a volley of missiles at the breach in the wall, taking down a handful of the enemies pouring in. And how about you? Off flirting with Sakura, I'd imagine. Naruto winced, but recovered in time to slash an attacker in the face, then roll over Ino's back, as she ducked for him, to drive his blade into the next victim's heart. Is this about the shadow clone thing? He asked tersely. Ino didn't answer, but instead jumped at Naruto, knocking him to the ground and out of the way of a fireball that roared by overhead. That's part of it, she hissed, and you lying to me about Hinata-kun being a demon. I didn't lie, said Naruto, wrapping his arms around Ino and rolling both of them to the side as a sound ninja landed within striking distance of where they'd been a second before. I just left that out. I love you, Ino said curtly, though with a glint of genuine and compassionate worry in her voice, but we're going to have to work on this whole communication thing. Both the genin leapt to their feet as more reinforcements from the town guard began to arrive and the battle's tempo really picked up. The well-drilled Konoha ninjas immediately broke off into smaller forces and concentrated on taking back the devastated quarter of Konoha one step at a time. Naruto and Ino cut a bloody swath through the sound nin, dodging and weaving around, hacking and slashing through anyone in their way, acting less like two ninja and more like one mind, and soon Konoha's forces had seemingly gained the upper hand. The price was high though. As Naruto paused just long enough look around at the carnage, he saw that the S on both sides were nearly the same. For every sound nin slain, there was a leaf ninja right beside him. The fighting had degenerated into chaotic individual combat. Two ninja would square off, fight for just a second, one would S in a blast or flash of blood, and the survivor would charge off to the next encounter. Nonetheless, Konoha was winning, driving the sound nin back towards the breach. BAAM. The earth shook and the air filled with dirt and debris as another massive section of the wall collapsed into rubble, leaving the original breach nearly 3 times as big. But it wasn't the hole that was the horror, it was the 80-foot-tall snake that had set the stone to bits and shirred into the city. A solitary leaf ninja screamed in fear and pain as the serpent swooped down and snatched him up in his jaws. Skewered on a massive fang and hanging halfway out its mouth, there wasn't much the nin could do but wail until, with a loud snap, the snake bit him in two and swallowed the lower half. Ino yelped as the truncated corpse fell at her feet and some of its blood sprayed across her boots. Naruto looked up and grabbed the platinum blonde girl, pulling her away just before the snake said bye, crushing a house in its way. How are we going to stop that thing? Naruto growled. Leave that to me, shouted someone right beside him. Both Naruto and Ino jumped, whirling around to see a tall boy in a green jumpsuit standing next to them. Even in the extreme situation, Naruto couldn't help but chuckle when he saw the boy's bowl-cut and unnaturally thick eyebrows. They looked like bushes in desperate need of a psychotic gardener. "I will be the one to defeat this menace," shouted the boy in green, pointing a bandaged hand at the snake, fire flashing in his eyes. "Ah," Naruto stuttered, "who are you?" He turned to face the Uzumaki and grinned. His teeth were literally blindingly white, and despite the fiery light all around reflected a perfectly colorless spark. "Rock Lee is my name," he shouted just before jumping straight at the snake. To both Genin's amazement, Lee sprinted up the polished scales of the monster at a breakneck speed as easily as if he were on a flat sidewalk. He jumped up to its head and grinned that stunning smile again before rearing back as if to punch. Lee bellowed and slammed his fist down into the snake's skull with a resounding crack and a shockwave that visibly sped through the reptile's skin. The snake whipped around madly, trying to throw Lee off, but the nin in green locked his iron fingers around a fold in the serpent's skin, holding on tight. "Don't worry about me," Lee shouted almost jovially as the snake whipped him about like a cheap ragdoll. "I'll be fine. You go and keep fighting on." "That guy's crazy," mumbled Ino from Naruto's side. "Crazy or not, he's dealing with the biggest threat here. Let's go." "Where?" Ino asked as the battle lulled just a bit. Naruto pointed off towards the east and nodded. "We'll head farther into the city and try to clean it up there. We're abandoning this side of the city." "We have to," Naruto said, jumping up and taking Ino by the hand. "Look around. The sound nin are still pouring in and our forces have been whittled away to nothing. The wall is all but gone and we're outnumbered. The only edge we have is our knowledge of the terrain and we need to use it as much as we can." Ino nodded and followed Naruto, both of them running deeper into the city, stopping in an intersection a few blocks away from the breach in the wall. There was blood and hardened clay everywhere, along with a dozen or so mutilated boss of leaf nin lying in the street. "What happened here?" wondered Naruto. Ino jumped and screamed as one of the ninja on the ground reached out and grabbed at her ankle. She clutched at her heart and then immediately stooped down by the raven-haired man, seeing that some kind of blade had sped his stomach open. He wasn't going to live long. "Run," said the man, "he's a goddamned demon." "What happened? Who did this?" asked Naruto. "That red-haired boy from Suna, he turned on us and killed everyone, then went and opened the north gate for the rest of those desert betrayers to rush in and start king. Suna betrayed us," Ino exclaimed. The S-ninja nodded. "Everyone else is done for. The Junin are being cut down as quickly as the town guard, but you have to stop the red-haired boy before he destroys us all. They're using him as the greatest weapon, both the sound and the sand. Stop him and the invasion will crumble." The nin closed his eyes and stopped breathing. "He must be talking about that Gaara character," Naruto mumbled. Ino set down the body and stood up, crossing her arms in front of her and glaring at Naruto sternly. "Don't even think about it," she barked. "Everything I've ever heard anyone say about Gaara makes him out to be absolutely lethal. You heard the man. Who's going to stop him if not me?" Naruto asked. "Do I have a choice?" "Yes," Ino growled. "You don't have to rush off and hunt him down. You'll get yourself killed." "Maybe," chuckled Naruto darkly, "but who's to say I wouldn't take him down with me and be a hero?" The hard look on Ino's face finally broke and tears welled up in her eyes. She walked over to Naruto without a word and put her arm around him. "Please," she whispered. "Don't go, not there. How can I call myself a true ninja if I'm not willing to risk a little danger for the sake of my village? Don't you see?" Ino hissed, pain in her voice. "This isn't just a little bit of danger. You could be and probably will be seriously hurt if not killed if you go off and do this. You're still weak from fighting Hinata with all of that demonic chakra, and you can't use much more without king yourself." Naruto was stunned, but his grip around her tightened around her. "You knew about that." His voice broke. "From the beginning," she muttered, smiling. "But I can't hold it against you, not telling me something like that. I was never going to ask." "Ino," he began, but couldn't finish. "No," she said kindly, "don't say anything just yet. I know the whole story. My grandmother told me, but don't think for one second that it changes anything. I love you and I always will no matter where you are. But please, don't make me let you go." Naruto was speechless. All he could think to do was pull her closer. For a moment there was a silence between them as the fires of the battle spread closer and closer to their spot beside the big stone wall, and the screams of the S grew a little louder with each passing second. But then again, Ino muttered after a moment, "I'm tearing you in two, aren't I?" Naruto didn't answer, but instead just set his forehead on her shoulder and closed his eyes. Ino could feel the few warm tears slowly seeping through her outfit onto her skin. She reached up and put one hand on the back of his head, running her fingers through his hair. "I don't want to lose you," she continued, "but I don't want to divide you either." There was another pause. The roar of the battle nearly doubled in intensity as, apparently, Konoha recovered from the betrayal and ambush, and started to bring its forces to bear. The explosions and flashes of chakra and fiery jutsus were illuminating the sky, while deafening roars of thunder were spinning through the air. "Naruto," Ino whispered. He looked up, eyes gently red, and tears lingering on the corners of them. His lips pursed like there was something he wanted to say, but the boy couldn't quite bring himself to utter whatever it was. "I'm not going to make you choose between me and Konoha," she whispered. "I'll be waiting at the celebration when this is all said and done. Don't you dare not be there." Naruto grinned weakly, but didn't loosen his grip even a little. "I'll be there. Same goes for you." "Go," she mumbled, her heart aching as she said it. He nodded and slowly let go, then took a single step backwards. But there he stood. "No matter which way I go," he whispered, "I'm coming back to you." Ino smiled and held her hand up in front of her chest, trying to catch her breath. And then Naruto was gone. He disappeared in a blur of speed, sprinting off to the north. Naruto charged forward, trying to avoid the fights that had broken out in the streets. He knew he had to conserve his energy for what was ahead, but at points the war was unavoidable. He'd get caught up in a fierce dogfight and have to blast one of the enemies with demonic chakra to clear a path, but each use of the fiery energy wore on him a little more than the last. In all reality, he had no idea where Gaara was, but he remembered the ninja mentioning the North Gate, so that was where he was going. With any luck, or perhaps none at all, he knew that's where he would find his enemy. The sounds of the battle were getting louder and he heard the screams of the S drawing nearer, so he knew he must be getting closer to something. Suddenly the vast majority of the screams and battle cries ceased, replaced by the roar of wind and a booming explosion. As he rounded a corner, his fears and hopes were confirmed. There, directly in front of the open gate, were Sasuke and Gaara, surrounded by mounds of S-boss from all sides of the conflict. Sasuke's left arm hung uselessly at his side, dripping with blood from a grievous wound on his shoulder. Gaara looked unconcerned, his face a mask of apathy as he glanced between Sasuke and this new, blonde nuisance. After just a second of studying him, Gaara looked up laughing and spoke. "So you must be the vessel for the Kyuubi no Kitsune," he said. Sasuke turned to see Naruto and jumped back, away from the sand demon, and landed beside Naruto. The raven-haired boy clutched at his badly bleeding arm as if he were trying to keep it from falling off. "Careful, Naruto, this thing is a monster," growled Sasuke. "I figured as much," responded Naruto, looking at Sasuke's arm. "What happened to you?" "He got a grip on it and I've been fighting off more than one opponent at a time, but I'll be okay." "Good," said Naruto, "go and find Sakura. Make sure she's alright, and if you can, then find Ino and keep her safe for me." "You don't have to do this by yourself," muttered the Uchiha, "let me help." "Sasuke," said Naruto soberly, his eyes still locked on Gaara, who was just waiting patiently, "don't make this any harder. If you stay here you're going to be ked. If I fight him on my own I can focus entirely on it, rather than needing to make sure that you're okay, and I might stand a chance. You're already tired though." "I'll be fine." Naruto grinned and looked toward Gaara, trying his best to look like he was ready for the near-at-hand fight. "Don't worry about a thing." Sasuke nodded once. "Be careful. He has some uncanny power over sand. It protects him like armor at times, but then he'll just turn around and use it as a weapon." "I understand," said Naruto, "now go. If anything happens to Ino or Sakura I'm holding you responsible." The raven-haired boy grinned and turned on his heel, not waiting for another word, and darted off into the city. Naruto watched him go, then turned back to the patiently waiting ninja standing about 30 feet in front of him. "I'll admit that I thought you'd be a little more imposing," said Gaara, "but nonetheless, I'd still like this to be over quickly. There's work to be done here." Why? Naruto asked. Why do this? Suna and Konoha have been allies for years. Why the sudden betrayal? Gaara shrugged. I'm just following orders and killing every leaf nin I see. It's as simple as that. Naruto sighed and decided that trying to talk the enemy nin out of the fight was not going to work. He hadn't thought he could, but it had been worth a shot. The blonde nin closed his eyes and immediately began summoning up demon chakra, enough to fuel some jutsu and augment his muscles but no more. He could already feel the strain on his body. I'm going to have to end this quickly. If there's a prolonged fight, this chakra is going to tear me apart faster than he is. Damn it, I've used too much already against Hinata. Naruto opened his eyes, as the red mist began to swirl around him, and glanced around at his surroundings, knowing the game had officially begun. Gaara made the first move, lashing out with a whip-like length of sand, snapping at Naruto, who jumped out of the way with a split second to spare. The blonde circled around, dodging the small needles of sand Gaara was flinging out like shuriken, and started circling faster, adding in spontaneous decreases in pace. The result of the indiscriminate bursts of speed and slow was an apparent host of Narutos circling around Gaara. The optical illusion seemed to give Naruto an edge, as Gaara's attacks started becoming more and more random. Naruto saw that it was working and started closing in his circle like a noose. He took a kunai in his right hand and closed in even more. He was less than 2 yards away. He would aim for the T and end it quickly. The ground beneath Naruto's feet shattered as he exploded in a blinding leap towards his enemy. The air wasn't allowed time to scream as the metal blade cut through it and continued towards Gaara's end. There was a dull thud as the blade connected with something hard as iron. The kunai sped from Naruto's hand and hurled off to the side just as the sound of the splitting air caught up. Naruto jumped back just in time to dodge a blow aimed at his head from the pillar of sand that had jumped up to stop his attack. The pillar didn't stop but instead shot through the air towards Naruto like a huge javelin. The boy jumped to the side as the weapon crashed into the house behind him. He looked up to see grains of sand swirling through the air around Gaara while the red-haired boy was grinning maliciously. What is this guy? Naruto wondered. If that wall is just going to jump up and defend him then attack me every time I get in close, I'm screwed. Is that all? Asked Gaara. I'll admit it was less than impressive. Perhaps if I take my turn now. Gaara lifted his head as a cloud of sand moved to engulf fragments of stone left behind from the destroyed houses around him. Naruto grimaced as the stones within the cloud lifted off the ground and began to vibrate in the air. It produced an unnerving, low-key humming. With a sudden, loud crack the stones shattered and pulverized, breaking down into sand that quickly added to the swirling cloud of sand. OS, Naruto mumbled. A wide grin split Gaara's face as he began running through a series of hand seals. Naruto considered leaping into attack, but didn't want to jumping not only into the wall of sand, but into some other kind of massive attack. There seemed no better option than to simply wait and react to the next move. Gaara finished the seals and a flash of energy shot through the cloud of sand, and immediately it began to fall to the ground, swirling and coagulating into gelatinous shapes. Naruto's mouth dropped open as the masses of sand began to form themselves into what looked like a duo of scorpions and a trio of snakes. With a crunching and grinding sound, the sand hardened and formed the skeletons of what were definitely 5 very large animals. The scorpions' tails rose nearly 18 feet off of the ground, and their boss stretched out half that length. The snakes were no shorter than 15 feet long and as thick as Naruto's body. Each animal was a sandy brown and looked like it was made out of stone. Gaara's hand twitched and the monsters jumped forward with astounding speed. The snakes were all around Naruto in a flash while the scorpions lumbered towards him a little more slowly. Naruto jumped in the air, avoiding a strike from one of the snakes by a hair's breadth, only to be caught in mid-jump by one of the scorpion's massive pincers. The air rushed out of his lungs as the claws closed around his stomach like a vice, the serrated edges cutting through his anbu suit and slicing into his skin. Naruto's voice choked in his tea, stifled by shock and pain. There was some burning on the edges of the pincers, some poison or acid. Pain exploded all throughout his arm as one of the serpents sunk its fangs deep into his wrist, injecting untold amounts of venom. What the hell is this? Naruto growled. Gaara grinned wickedly. Desert warriors, he sneered, I thought you might enjoy them. Naruto groaned, not from the poison or the wounds, but from the realization. This was not going to be over quickly unless he unleashed more of the demonic chakra than he should. He wasn't going to be able to beat Gaara unless he flooded his body with the power, but if that were the case then it wasn't likely that either of them would survive the fight. No choice, he thought, visualizing the ocean of red energy in front of himself, and diving in. Red chakra exploded out of Naruto's body, casting a bloody light over the whole scene. The scorpion's claw melted to glass in an instant, as did the snake latched onto his wrist, then both shattered away in a blast of shrapnel. Naruto glared at the three remaining sand animals and a grin crossed his face. The red chakra swirled around him, shaping itself by its own accord into a rough outline of spiky fur and claws more than a foot long. A tail like that of a fox coalesced behind him, sweeping side to side and leaving trails of fire through the air in its wake. Naruto pointed a single finger at the one remaining scorpion and flicked a blinding beam of energy at it. The scorpion exploded in a burst of sand and glass. Naruto whirled around and disappeared in a blur, materializing between the other two snakes. They struck at him but Naruto snapped out and caught them by their ts. With one twist of his wrists both snakes snapped in two as if they were as brittle as granite, falling to the ground and disintegrating into dust. Glaring furiously, pain etching itself on his face, Naruto turned to Gaara and growled. The red-haired boy grimaced. Obviously he hadn't expected Naruto to reveal this much of his power, but now that he had, both knew that nothing was barred. If you really want to destroy this whole city, then we could go on like this. I'll unleash Shukaku, you use more of the Kyuubi's chakra, we'll destroy ourselves and everybody ss. Is that what you want? Gaara asked with a smirk. Naruto turned his eyes down and stared at the ground for just a second, thinking. Gaara seed his head off to one side and glared at Naruto. Actually, said the Uzumaki, I don't plan on fighting you here at all. Gaara didn't have a second to think before Naruto was suddenly right in front of him. The wall of sand was on its way up to absorb any damage Naruto might try to inflict, but it was too late. Naruto slammed his fist into Gaara's stomach, propelling the sand nin high into the air. With a burst of fiery energy Naruto jumped up after him and caught up in an instant. Gaara spun in midair, blocking the punch Naruto threw at his face, then retaliated by jabbing at the blonde Zen, his hand encased in a sheet of razor-sharp sand. Naruto took the hit, his skin splitting beneath the blade. It sent his blood splattering across Gaara's hand and shirt, but bought Naruto the time he needed. The blonde reared back, red energy swirling like a tornado in his hand, forming into a fiery dervish. With an ear-splitting roar Naruto shoved his hand forward, the Rasengan whipping the air all around into a firestorm. Gaara cringed as the attack impacted his last layer of defense, the iron-hard shell of sand he kept around his body at all times, and punched right through. Blood exploded from Gaara's mouth as the Rasengan sped into his stomach, tearing him apart from the inside out and shredding his innards. Then, Naruto released all the energy from the attack at once in an explosion of evil chakra. The shockwave burst out of Gaara from every angle and sent the two nin, both still hanging in midair, hurtling in opposite directions. Gaara was propelled like a bleeding comet beyond the walls of Konoha, while Naruto was thrown violently to the ground just outside the great stone wall in a cloud of dirt. Naruto glanced around dazed. The explosion had been much more powerful than he would have guessed possible, though from what he could tell Gaara was still mostly in one piece, which meant this fight wasn't over. But he couldn't move. Damn, muttered Naruto, rolling off his back and onto his stomach in the small crater he'd left from his landing. I used way too much chakra for that stupid Rasengan. Jiraiya said it would take a lot out of me if I used it full power, but I didn't think he meant all of my energy. Naruto struggled for a minute, trying to work his hands under his chest to push himself to his knees. With a groan he shifted his weight and crawled to the edge of his crater, then pushed himself to his feet. He glanced around, his vision spinning, trying to find some trail that would lead him to Gaara, but there was no obvious hint. There was, however, a smell. Naruto could sense in the air some trace remnant of the sand nin that was stronger off towards the west. I can't let him get away, got to make sure this is over. Hobbling, barely able to make himself drag his feet along, Naruto began to push through the underbrush and crawl towards where the evil scent was strongest. He didn't have to search long for his quarry. Lying face down next to a blood-red fern, was the sand nin Gaara. The ground all around him was soaked in his blood, though his back was nearly unblemished, making him appear asleep. His eyes were clenched shut though there was no pain on his face. Naruto walked cautiously up to the body, wondering if he was but stopped cold when he saw the dirt around him stirring. Grains of sand were rising to the surface, coming together to form small tentacles that wreathed around as if they couldn't decide whether to go left or right. Well, it ended quickly, muttered Gaara into the dirt. It's not over, whispered Naruto. Oh, sighed the Sand Nin. I see. You've come to make sure I'm no longer a threat. Naruto didn't answer. I'm not going to beg, said Gaara, his voice quiet but measured. But before you finish me off, no. I won't ask. Just get on with it. Go on, said Naruto. I've got some questions you're going to answer first, so I might as well answer one of yours. Gaara groaned, the first audible sign of the pain he was in. Who do you fight for? Naruto flinched. Is it for your village? Your family? What drives you? Your mentor? Perhaps you want to win his approval. Naruto leaned against a tree, not sure how to answer. An image of Ino flashed behind his eyes. He knew he was fighting to protect her and make sure she would be happy in the end, but at the same time he was fighting for Konoha. He had left her alone to defend the village. Then, much to his surprise, Sakura appeared before him, or an image of her at least. For my friends, Naruto mumbled, shaking the picture from his mind. Gaara turned his head and cracked one eye open to look at Naruto. Your friends? He asked. Yeah, I'd do anything for them. Must be nice, said the Sand Nin. Naruto nodded. Now, why would you betray Konoha? Gaara closed his eye, resigning himself to what he knew was coming. I suppose there's no harm in it, he said. It was by order of the Kazekage. He's recently been having meetings with the Sound Village who, as you know, hate Konoha. I don't know how, but the Kazekage was persuaded to join in on the invasion. I thought it was out of character for him to betray so quickly, but it's not my place to question orders, only follow them. So you think the Kazekage was being manipulated? Asked Naruto. Gaara turned his head and looked straight at Naruto. No, he said very quietly but as clear as day, I think he was Ked. What do you mean? Naruto asked. I saw him at the exams. He was alive then. I don't think that was him, mumbled Gaara, the leader of the Sound Village, the man with the white face and the yellow eyes. After he came to the village, ever since then the Kazekage hasn't been quite right. He's always smelled different somehow, almost like slime. Slime, white skin and yellow eyes, repeated Naruto. The leader of the Sound Village, Gaara continued, I think he ked the Kazekage and took his place. But I can't be sure. And then he looked at Naruto with a smirk. And your friend, the one with the black hair and funny red eyes, he smelled just like the Kazekage. Naruto froze, pondering some question he didn't voice. I suppose we'd best get on with this, groaned Gaara. Naruto thought silently for a second, and then turned away from Gaara. I'm not going to KU, he mumbled. How can I? Gaara didn't answer. We're not too dissimilar, you and I, Naruto whispered, just on different sides of the fence. Gaara was still quiet, and Naruto turned to see that his eyes were closed and he couldn't tell whether or not the Sound Nin was breathing. There was so much blood on the ground that Naruto couldn't tell whether or not the blood was still flowing. A sigh escaped Naruto. It's too bad, mumbled Naruto. None of this was your fault. You were just doing what you were told, and it's not really even Suna's fault if you're right. Gaara looked up again, his eyes glazing in stark contrast to the dark circles surrounding them. Isn't it funny, said the Sand Nin, the way demons have a way of finding each other. Naruto looked back down, surprised that Gaara was still alive. What do you mean? Can't you smell it? Asked Gaara, all of the demonic energy flowing from the city over there. It's delicious. Naruto looked back towards the village and sniffed the air. He didn't smell a thing aside from the smoke of burning buildings. That little girl with the funny eyes, said the Sand Nin, she's really running amok from the sound of things, and I know as well as you do that she can't be stopped by anyone less than yourself. Naruto looked down at Gaara again, trying to figure out what the Nin was thinking. There's only one constant in this universe, said Gaara, and it's a simple one. The only thing that can defeat power is more power. That's why there is no shame in losing to you. You were simply more powerful than I and there was no way to avoid it, however, even you may not be more powerful than that girl. Naruto flinched and looked up and off towards Konoha. I think you're wrong, Naruto muttered under his breath. The one constant in the world is that everyone suffers. There's no escaping it and there's no justice in it, but everyone suffers. Gaara looked away and pondered Naruto's words for a moment, then turned his attention towards Konoha as Naruto did. She's growing more powerful by the minute. It would seem that the demon inside of her is beginning to truly manifest itself. The breath caught in Naruto's tea. I've got to stop her, he mumbled, before no one can. Gaara grew impatient. Would you hurry up and get this over with then? There may be no shame in death here, but if you could just make it quick. I told you I'm not going to kill you, said Naruto, you haven't committed any crime. But as for now I can't save you either. I've got to go. Naruto turned around and started off towards Konoha, pumping some of his own chakra, not the demonic brand, into his body and muscles, trying to heal them as well as he could on the run before he needed to fight again. He left Gaara where he'd found him. I won't forget this, said the Sand Nin, not in 100 years. SC. Ino slashed through an attacker, spattering his blood on the ground at her feet, then took the still crimson knife and flung it into the tea of another ninja from the sound. She ducked under a sizzling bolt of lightning that shot straight over her head and rolled for cover, landing behind the rubble of what had at one point been a street vendor's cart. This is getting crazy, she gasped, there's too many of them and I'm almost out of energy. Just then she looked up to see a Sound Nin leaping over her hiding place. He'd seen her and was rearing back to strike. This was it, she was caught off guard and knew it was over. The enemy Nin looked shocked and hesitated, but lurched in midair and hung there, a hand protruding from his chest where his heart had been a few milliseconds before. The hand was shining like the sun and the lightning enveloping it was shrieking. Sasuke jerked the corpse off his hand and threw it to the ground and offered his clean, hand to help her up. She accepted it and got to her feet, as Sasuke motioned for her to follow. Thanks for that back there, Ino gasped as he pulled her off to one side and into an alley away from the fighting. No problem, muttered Sasuke, actually I didn't see you there when I killed that ninja, but I'm glad I could help. Nonetheless, I owe you one. She cut herself off as she got a good look at him for the first time. Sasuke looked at her confused, then grimaced. Oh, I keep forgetting, he began slowly, reaching up to touch the dark marks that encircled his lower end, like a tattoo of a chain leash. Sasuke, that seal, she whispered, concerned. It's nothing, he spat out each word like poison. Please, don't tell anyone, he said, pulling up the edges of his collar to hide the seal again. I've been drawing power from the seal to keep up with all of these invaders. Are you sure you're going to be okay? She whispered, suddenly afraid. Sasuke shook his head. I don't know, but it's only going to get worse if anyone else becomes involved. Especially Naruto. I don't want him getting mixed up in all of this. It wouldn't be good for either of us. If you're sure that's what you want, Ino said, trying to keep her voice calm. It is, but as for now you should probably fall back to the inner parts of the city where we still have a foothold. The battle has turned in our favor up north, no doubt thanks to Naruto, but to the west we're losing ground again. I'm headed that way to do what I can. Let me come with you, Ino blurted. No. Sasuke cut her off. Ino looked at him surprised that he was turning down help. Sasuke had always seemed more practical than that to her. I promised Naruto I'd find you and get you out of harm's way, but I can't do that if you're following me off to the thickest part of the fight. Please, fall back. Why now? Ino asked, skepticism thick in her voice. You've never been too concerned with keeping people safe. Sasuke flinched, like the question physically stung him and closed his eyes. He looked at her a second later, his Mangekyo Sharingan fierce in his eyes, though there was no unkindness on his face. These eyes were a horrible accident, he muttered. Fate saw fit to force them on me, but it wasn't without a steep price. I don't understand. Sasuke closed his eyes again and deactivated the bloodline. A little girl, innocent as an infant, had to ask for me to get these eyes, he groaned. I didn't send her home when I had the chance, and not 3 hours later she was killed in an attack on my position. I killed her, Ino, because I didn't send her away when I should have. His voice was trembling but his face was stoic. If I could take it all back I would without a second thought. This power, as amazing as it is, cost too much. Sasuke, Ino muttered, I had no idea this was weighing on you so much. Sasuke's face, for a brief instant, broken lines of pain carved themselves into his features before he hid them away behind a mask of apathy. There's only one person I would wish this kind of thing on and he'll be soon enough. But that's beside the point. You mean a lot to Naruto and he's my friend. So for his sake, please fall back and be safe. Ino looked down, images of Naruto rioting through her mind. I will, she whispered, but Sasuke. He looked up at her, his face back to its normal, uncaring facade. Naruto loves you like a brother. I know it doesn't come across that way sometimes, but he really does. Realization flickered across Sasuke's face, and he nodded, before turning to leave. But answer me one question, Ino said, stopping him again. Why are you throwing yourself in harm's way like this? It's not like you. Sasuke grinned a hollow smile. Exactly, he muttered, it's not like me. That's why I have to do it, because if I'm tired of this, I want to be different. Take it to mean what you will, but I'm not going to be remembered as a bastard or a monster. Even if it means here, I'm not going to be like this. You can tell Naruto that if you wish, and that we may as well have been brothers these past few months. And then Sasuke was gone. Ino looked around pondering what he said. What did he mean he wasn't going to be remembered as a monster or a bastard? Sasuke's never been the kind to want to do the right thing for its own sake. Is he planning on or worse? Either way it didn't matter. There was nothing that could be done about it now, and the only thing left was to keep a promise. Ino darted out of the alley and started sprinting towards the Hokage's office. It was far enough away from the battle, she thought. The buildings around him were a blur as he charged down the main road, following the scent of death that he could now detect with ease. The current radiating from the base of the monument to the Hokage's was all too obvious, and Naruto knew that's where he would find Hinata. He saw the massive edifice, the four-stone face, rising into the sky above him in seconds and raced under one of the large arches, jumping up the flights of stone stairs to get to the high-rise balcony that encircled the memorial. He stopped cold for a second when he saw a blood-soaked body laying in his path and bent down to see who it was. He rolled the corpse over and knew from the strange lavender-white eyes that it was a Hyuga. It was no one he knew personally and he thanked his luck that it wasn't Neji. Naruto could hear the sounds of battle from atop the monument and started his trek up again with renewed vigor, noticing that he passed 4 more boss on his way. Each one wore the same white robes as the first body he found. This is bad, he mumbled as he sprang to the platform atop the stone edifice. In front of him were 3 shapes, each one a Hyuga. Nearest him, his back turned to Naruto, was Neji, his arms hanging at his sides and his robe soaked in blood. There were tears in the cloth that allowed Naruto glances at what looked like puncture wounds all over his body that were the source of the blood. In front of Neji was Hyuga Hiashi, the head of the clan and, arguably, the most powerful man in Konoha aside from the Hokage. He was standing calm, and seemingly unharmed aside from a few scratches and scuffs in his robe. Naruto guessed that Neji had taken more than a few blows for him. Across from Hiashi, standing in the darkest shadows of the clouds of smoke billowing above, was Hinata. Everything about her was nothing short of demonic. Her hands, especially her long and slice-sharp fingernails, de-sped with blood, and her eyes shade-matched the crimson liquid. Most notably though, was her skin. All over her body were glowing red runes etched in black. The smoldering seals seemed to be crackling and smoking like the fire that burned in her eyes. Neji turned around to see Naruto at the same time that Hiashi and Hinata did. The clan leader looked surprised by the boy's presence, but then smiled slightly. The Hyuga boy jumped back and landed by Naruto, still in as defensive a stance as he could muster. Glad you could make it, Neji muttered as Hinata and Hiashi faced off. This is going to get really ugly. What are those marks all over her? Asked Naruto. Seals, Neji muttered. Each one cost the life of one of the warriors Hiashi-sama and I brought, but each one seals up almost 1/10 of her power. Hiashi stepped forward and Hinata exploded towards him, whirling in midair to strike out. Her fingers were burning with an orange fire, but Hiashi nimbly knocked her hands aside and struck her in the end with 2 fingers. Then, as quick as lightning, the man twisted and ducked around her, jamming her twice more with Gyuken, then 4 times in the back, then 8 times in the chest. Despite doubling the strikes, each attack took the same amount of time as the one before it. Naruto was staggered by how quickly the clan head was moving. Even his eyes were having trouble keeping up. The highest form of Gyuken, said Neji, the strikes of the many, that Hiashi-sama can take to the 7th tier of attacks. Each move takes less than a second. Even as Neji spoke, Hiashi lashed out again, striking Hinata another 16 times, then effortlessly hit her 32 times, then 64, then, he became a blur of white and blue, and Hinata was thrown into the stone wall with a thunderous crash. And yet for all of this, muttered Neji, as Hinata picked herself up off of the ground and grinned at Hiashi, even with nearly 80% of her power sealed away, even with Hiashi-sama's uncanny ability to read the near future, Hinata-sama is unfazed. And within 10 minutes, shouted the demon girl, I will be rid of these pesky tattoos and you will see what the hordes of hell are truly capable of. Hiashi didn't seem worried. His face was perfectly peaceful. Hinata charged forward and attacked Hiashi head-on, only to receive the same treatment as before, pummeled by hundreds of hits by the master of Gyuken, and being thrown a dozen meters back into a stone wall. She, however, just as before, got back up. The only difference in the scene was that Hiashi's eyes were a little more clouded by fatigue. How can I hope to stop this? Naruto screamed at himself, I don't stand a chance unless I. Hiashi turned to Naruto and looked him over carefully before speaking. Boy, he said flatly, in the voice of a man looking death in the face, even with this it will be your life for hers, to a going to after I, and then he turned back to the demon staring at him through his daughter's eyes. Hiashi put his hands together and formed the seal of the ram, then the bird, then the horse, until Hinata charged forward to stop whatever he was planning. Hiashi however jumped into the air, not hesitating in his seals, ending on the ram again. Hinata looked up and roared as the man who had been her father flashed with a brilliant lavender light. Everyone had to look away from what seemed to be a second sun in the sky. Hinata was the first to look up at the silhouette of a man in the sky that seemed to be made of light, illuminating the darkness cast by the clouds of smoke in the air. The fiery angel in the sky swooped down with inhuman speed and passed through Hinata as effortlessly as one would walk through the mist, disappearing after it left her body. She crumpled to the ground, shaking, her body smoking with blue vapor. Run! Naruto shouted to Neji, leaping through the air towards Hinata, exploding with red chakra as he did. Neji obeyed and began to back away as the fiery energy rolled off of Naruto in waves and the boy was enveloped in it. Naruto's eyes immediately widened into the red, stead eyes of the demon whose power he was drawing on, and as he landed by the girl, the demonic chakra was choking the air all around. Hinata looked up as Naruto's fist closed around her and tried to growl as he lifted her into the air, his muscles fueled by the hellish amounts of chakra. Two tails of demonic energy formed behind Naruto, as the ethereal fur and claws coalesced over his body and hands. Each tail was nearly the length of a house and thrashed uncontrollably behind him, tearing up the stone tiles of the monument's platform. He growled, held his free hand back, and the cloud of energy began to churn into his hand. The spinning mass of chakra shrunk to the size of a baseball, but burned wildly and swirled like a typhoon. Hinata struggled and kicked at him, pumping her own chakra into her hands and trying to burn Naruto's wrists into letting her go, but it wasn't working. Naruto's grip was unbreakable. Time's up, Naruto growled, even his voice was thick with the demonic chakra. In a furious motion, he rammed the unearthly Rasengan into Hinata's stomach. She screamed. The wind all around was whipping and boiling with the energy and chaos of the raw power in the air. Hinata's eyes were incensed as she glared into Naruto's. She opened her mouth and roared even above the bellow of the Rasengan, grabbing Naruto's attacking hand and wrenching it away from her with inhuman strength. Naruto tried to shove it back into her to finish this, but Hinata's hand, charged by her own demonic energy, met the Rasengan halfway, stopping it in its path. The two demons raged, the Rasengan between them roaring like a hurricane as they both tried to force it back towards the other. The skin on Naruto's hand began to ripple like water in the wind as the forces dueled in his palm, threatening to tear the F off his bones, while the palm of Hinata's hand had been stripped of any skin at all, exposing the muscle underneath. Even then, however, she still pushed. You don't have control of it. Hinata screamed over the wind, my power is limitless. So is mine. Naruto roared, another tail of red chakra exploding behind him. The boy's eyes widened to fiery yellow orbs, and he shoved the Rasengan back towards Hinata with a strength no one had ever witnessed before. The ball of energy tore through the girl's arm, shredding it into oblivion before it passed effortlessly through her shoulder, disintegrating everything in its path. Naruto released the attack with a burst of red chakra, propelling it hundreds of miles into the distance in an instant, where it exploded. The red fireball hung in the sky for a trio of seconds, blotting out the eastern horizon, before the shockwave reached Konoha. The air heaved forward and rolled like searing waves in a storm with the force of the explosion, shattering windows and igniting fires in the higher trees throughout the city. Ino raced up the marble stairs, feeling like the world was ending. The whole village was in chaos. The sudden blast and the heat had shaken the resolve of all three armies within the city, and the sand invaders had even been thrown into full retreat. It was wonderful news, despite the grievous damage the city was sustaining, but there was only one thing on Ino's mind now. She knew exactly what was going on. She's felt this energy before in the stadium. She didn't know what she could do, but the mission was clear. She had to do whatever she could to help Naruto, no matter the cost. She cleared the top of the stairs and gawped. It was a scene straight from the portraits of hell. Some being of fiery red power, three tails of energy wreaking havoc behind it, was standing over a crumpled, but not defeated monster glowing with orange light. She couldn't tell who was who, simply because of how thick the two auras of chakra hung in the air. Naruto! She screamed, petrified and irrational, fearing that Naruto was the figure on the ground clutching at the stump of a missing arm. The figure looked up. It wasn't him but Hinata, and instantly Ino felt a fiery pain at her tea. Hinata had appeared behind her in a blur of speed and now had her around the N, her long claws positioned so that if either of them moved, Ino's tea would be SD open. Naruto whirled around and froze. Hinata was grinning wickedly and Ino had just now caught up with the panic. Fear was in both girls' eyes as they stared at Naruto. Let her go, Naruto's voice boomed, sounding more like a demon than a 12-year-old boy. I don't think so, Hinata cackled, glancing down at the fear on Ino's face. That man with the yellow, snake eyes didn't release me just so I could at your hands. If you want the girl back, you're going to step back slowly and... Hinata hesitated as a sizzling sound raced through the air. She glanced down at her arm and saw that the Hyuga's seals were fading rapidly. Already 3 of the 8 seals had faded away. By the time she realized that much, 2 more had vanished, and as Naruto registered what was happening, the last of the seals was completely gone. A grisly laughter pervaded everything as Hinata looked up at Naruto, her eyes burning like coals. Never mind, she said, it doesn't matter now. Before Naruto could act, before he could even think, Hinata had shifted, and driven her claws up through Ino's back. The bloody talons were protruding through the girl's chest as Ino looked down at them in horror. Ino shifted her gaze to Naruto and stared into his eyes in shock, just before Hinata jerked her hand and sent Ino's body tumbling across the floor. No. Thing B. Naruto screamed, I'm going to. Naruto stopped short as Hinata's hand slammed into his chest, sending rays of energy directly through his heart and sending him flying back like a tossed scrap of cloth. Before he could land, Hinata materialized behind him and set her elbow into the back of his N. Blood erupted from Naruto's mouth even before his attacker whirled and crushed him to the ground with a ferocious kick. Naruto lay there stunned as Hinata glowered over him triumphantly. Her heavy foot pounded down onto his chest and held him to the ground. He could hear his ribs cracking under the weight, but couldn't move to stop her. His world was spinning. Nothing made any sense at all. Naruto, he heard his name weakly whispered, but all he could see was Hinata standing on him and howling with laughter as the whole world seemed to burn down around him. Naruto, the voice called again, no stronger than before. The boy turned his head and saw Ino, slowly bleeding out through her chest and back, leaning up against a wall to look towards him. Please, she muttered almost silently, though somehow he heard her. Please don't please don't, please. I love you, don't leave me alone. Tears welled in Naruto's eyes and streamed down his face. He choked on the lump in his tea, reaching one hand out towards Ino. He wanted nothing more than to have her in his arms. Is it going to cry? Hinata mocked, grinding down on Naruto's chest and breaking the last of his ribs away from his sternum. I think it is. Naruto did cry, but it was only as Ino closed her eyes and slumped back. The tears rolled freely down his face. The demonic energy faded from around him. Though the tails remained, the aura faded and his hands fell useless at his sides. Not like this, he choked, how can it end like this? Hinata bellowed with laughter and leaned down, picking Naruto up by his collar and holding him at eye level. Life is cruel, Hinata whispered into his ear, just before she kissed him insultingly on the cheek, but at least you're going to have one hell of an afterlife to look forward to. Oh, don't worry, I'll make sure that when I get back to hell that I find you and make sure you're never bored. But the best part of the deal is that first, she glanced over her shoulder at Ino, I'm going to devour her soul. Naruto cringed, but his eyes flew open wide. She won't even get the benefit of seeing you down there, Hinata laughed, she'll be rotting in my belly for all of eternity. Doesn't that just sound like so much fun? She dropped Naruto and sauntered over to Ino, and jerked her arm, flinging the mortally wounded girl to Naruto's side. Ino didn't open her eyes or even flinch when she landed. Hinata walked back over and picked up the blonde girl. I want you to see this, she muttered, opening her mouth, revealing 2 rows of incredibly sharp teeth. No, Naruto roared, fiery chakra exploding out from his body at every angle. He stood up and slashed at Hinata, who dodged easily, but tossed away Ino in the process. Haven't you learned your lesson yet, you pesky little fox? She chuckled. Naruto arched his back and reared up to his full height as another 3 tails of fiery chakra appeared behind him and the air all around instantly burst into flame. Naruto roared again, this time with all the fury of a demon lord, and glared at Hinata, absolute hatred burning behind his scarlet eyes. The demon girl blanched when she saw the 6th tail emerge, but didn't even have the time to turn around before Naruto's claws, now more than 2 feet long, hacked her other arm from her body. It fell to the ground even as the enraged Naruto moved too quickly to be seen and rammed his claws through Hinata's stomach and jerked her towards him. For an eternal second he glared into her eyes, and she stared into the very blackest pits of hell, knowing exactly what fate awaited her. I'll see you soon, he hissed into her ear, and when I do, this will all seem but a fond memory of your life on Earth. Naruto sped his claws out of her belly and reared back, a billionth of a second before the same claws drove into Hinata's face. Her skull shattered instantly from the wave of energy that followed, and the decapitated body fell backwards onto the ground. Naruto turned, and only then realized that he couldn't feel his body. His will shattered and the demon tails, as well as the last of the red chakra, passed away from sight. The air was again clear and clean, but dark from the clouds overhead. He fell backwards and lay there for what seemed like hours, but managed the strength to roll on his side. He wanted desperately to see Ino, to suddenly wake up and find that she was all right. But when he saw her body lying unceremoniously off to one side, his heart broke and, as far as he could tell, stopped beating. Ino, he called out weakly. She didn't answer, and again, the tears welled up behind his eyes. Ino, he screamed, his voice breaking. Still, she was quiet. Working against the numbness that started in his heart and was quickly spreading outwards, Naruto crawled towards her, using the one hand he could find the strength to lift. Each movement spread the numbness further, but Naruto was beyond caring. He didn't care if it killed him, he was going to see Ino one last time before oblivion claimed him. He reached her side and collapsed there, unable to crawl closer. The last of his strength was gone and he could feel his world fading. He managed to slide one hand up to stroke her cheek. It was cold and she didn't flinch. The tears spilled out of his eyes and he wept. Moments passed, and the only thing that kept him alive was the will to weep over her. Finally though, the crying stopped and Naruto laid his head down next to hers. Naruto! A voice from the distance shrieked. But Naruto didn't hear it. He had already closed his eyes. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.